Gnana Deeksha, the concept-based digital learning. I am Kirti. Today we will be learning about biodiversity and principles of conservation. The main objectives of biodiversity are, we will be learning about what is biodiversity, levels of biodiversity, different types of biodiversity, the threat to biodiversity, value of biodiversity, the IUCN classification, principles of conservation including in situ and ex situ conservation methods, and some of the important conventions. So, before we directly start what exactly is this biodiversity, we will see what is evolution. Evolution is a common phenomenon or a natural phenomenon which operates in nature. It is defined as a slow process or a gradual change taking place over the time. So there will be a lot of changes taking place in the organisms. So therefore, we have every time the evolution of new species or sometimes replacement of one species with the another. Now this replacement or loss of species can be attributed to our advanced knowledge and technology that is rapidly changing the environment. It is very important to have ecological balance in an ecosystem because there is equal importance for every single species on this earth. So this balance is required in order to maintain the ecosystem and to maintain the biodiversity. So biodiversity is also called as biological diversity. So the word bio means life or living organisms and diversity means variability. The first time that this term biodiversity was coined by the environmentalist Walter Rosen in the year 1985, and it is defined as the number, the variety and the variability of living organisms at all levels within a given region. So there are three different levels of biodiversity where it can be studied. The first one is genetic diversity, the next species diversity, and the next one is ecosystem or ecological diversity. So coming to genetic diversity, so when you define genetic diversity, it is actually the heritable variation within the population and in between the population of organisms. Now within an organism, a diversity or a genetic diversity can occur due to mutation. So mutations are nothing but changes or alterations of DNA what we see. The genetic diversity can occur at nucleotide level, allele level, gene level and at chromosome level. So the main primary source for this genetic diversity is mutation. So example, you have genetic diversity in bananas, different colors, different taste and different varieties of bananas throughout India, and even different genetic diversity in dogs. The species diversity. Species is actually the basic unit of classification. The species diversity gives you an idea about the variety of species present in a particular area. It includes the number of species and also will give you the relative abundance of the species. The third one is the ecological diversity, or you can also call it as ecosystem diversity. Ecosystem diversity, it is actually defined as variety of ecosystems occurring in a bigger landscape or a bigger geographical area than their variability, that is changes taking place over the time. The variety of ecosystems in an area and their interactions are studied under ecological diversity. There are types of biodiversity at community level. They are the alpha diversity, the beta diversity and the gamma diversity. So coming to alpha diversity, it is also called as local biodiversity or local diversity. It is actually based on species richness, that is number of species present in a given area, and also its even distribution throughout the ecosystem. Then they share same, all the organisms living in one particular habitat here, they share same habitat and they compete for same type of resources like food, shelter. And it increases, the alpha diversity increases with increase in number of individuals. And coming to beta diversity, it is actually the diversity taking place in between two communities. So any change in the habitat of the organisms or any environmental changes occurring, it will also lead to change in the species composition. Example, if we take moss community on a mountain slope, it changes with as the altitude of the slope is increasing. So as the number of moss species are increasing as you go above the mountain, the beta diversity is said to be high. If you are seeing only one type of species occurring from bottom to the top of the mountain slope, then it indicates less diversity, indicating less beta diversity. Then third one being the gamma diversity. It is a diversity of a habitat of a total landscape or a bigger geographical area. It can also be called as regional diversity. It is actually the addition of alpha as well as beta diversity. Here, the diversity at species level, community level and habitat levels are observed. Biodiversity is rich in tropical countries. Throughout the world, when you compare the tropical countries with the rest of the parts of the world, the biodiversity is richer in tropical countries. So when I say biodiversity is rich, it means it is rich in rich flora and fauna. That is plants and animals, including microbial organisms. Now, these countries where we are seeing rich biodiversity are called as nations of megadiversity. It is covering the South and North American continents like Ecuador, Peru, Brazil. And in Asian continent, it is covering countries like India, China and Indonesia. And in Africa, it is covering Madagascar and Congo and Australian continent. Now, when we say the biodiversity is richer in tropical countries, at the same time, because of more reasons we have, like either by human interference or by natural causes, there is also danger to biodiversity. That is called as threat to biodiversity. Now, what exactly are the factors which are causing the threat to the biodiversity? The first one being the extinction of species. Now, generally in nature, extinction of species and replacement is a normal process. But this rate of extinction is slow in an undisturbed ecosystems. But human interference is accelerating the rate, causing many species to become extinct every year. So there is necessary to conserve biodiversity. So we will just see threat to biodiversity under two categories. So what are the natural causes which are posing threat to biodiversity? The first one being the climate change. Example, we can take the recent locust swarm attack in India, which is due to change in the climatic conditions. They have entered into the Indian territory from Pakistan, but all this is because of owing to heavy rainfall and cyclones, which led to changes in the temperatures. So this change in temperature has led to growth or breeding of the locust, and they are formed in large groups. Now, what exactly these locusts do? These locusts feed on vegetable and food crops and cause great loss to farmers and crop biodiversity. So, another climate changes factors are, we are seeing day by day rapid changes in environment. Now, this is also leading to change in ecosystems. So, if we consider Arctic and Antarctic regions, it is actually a home for more than 500 species of plants and animals. Reduction in number of glaciers and due to melting of ice caps, it's also one of the serious threat to species. Because of this, 20% of coral reefs have already been lost, while 15% are facing the threat. Apart from this, in last 2 decades, 35% of mangrove forests have been lost. Volcanic eruptions is one more factor, that is, which damages the rich flora and fauna, and floods. The recent example can be taken as Kaziranga National Park, where floods have, because of floods, we have lost many rhinoceros species. Kaziranga National Park is famous for protection of one-horned rhinos. Apart from rhinoceros, we have lost almost more than 208 animals there. Then coming to the forest fires. The recent one being the Australian bushfire, which started in the September 2019, also called as Black Summer. And in India, the recent one is Uttarakhand forest fire, which has damaged many animal and plant species. So in such natural calamities, it is a serious threat to the biodiversity as we are losing many species. What are the other factors caused by human which is leading to threat to biodiversity are habitat loss or destruction, habitat fragmentation, hunting and poaching, introduction of exotic and invasive species, population explosion, pollution and gem cultivation. Let us see one by one. Habitat loss or destruction is nothing but it is due to rapid industrialization and urbanization, which is leading to deforestation. The forest areas are cleared and then the species are losing their access to native home. So like this, 14% of rainforests are now reduced to only 6%. Apart from this, if we see aquatic ecosystem, oil spilling is causing a greater damage to this aquatic ecosystems. Coming to the habitat fragmentation, it is actually breaking the habitat into smaller patches, not allowing the animals to have a complete access to their home range. They cannot move throughout their home range. So example, building up of railway network lines in the forest and bridges connecting the forest patches. Now this is a serious problem because it is exposing large number of animals to hunting pressure and poaching. Coming to hunting and poaching, it is actually killing of animals, wild animals against the government law or for illegal trade. You all know about ivory of elephant and skin of tiger, which has been an illegal trade since long time. And the peacocks, deers are killed for their meat. So India has regulated an act. According to that Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, hunting and poaching of wild animals is prohibited in India. Then introduction of exotic or invasive species. Actually, it's an introduction of one species which is brought from to the ecosystem by humans from different place. It is either accidentally or purposefully. Invasive species will have a greater environmental and economic impact. Examples, we have kudzu creeper, which is actually native to Japan, but it has got established in USA as problematic weed species. And in animals, if we take example of European rabbits, it is introduced in all the continents except Antarctica, which cause many problems within the ecosystem and environment. Then other factors like population explosion is a serious threat. As the population increases, the demand for the resources also increase. There will be overexploitation of the resources which lead to loss of many plants and animal species. And pollution being the other factor where most of the regions are showing the decline in biodiversity. Then coming to jhum cultivation. Actually, this is also called as slash or burn agriculture or podu cultivation, which is followed by tribal communities of northeastern India. They clear the patches of forest and vegetation for the cultivation of crops, and after harvesting the crop, the area is burnt completely. Now this completely reduces that area into ash, and so like this we see many patches of cleared vegetation in the forest leading to loss of important plant species. So though we have danger, definitely we have lots and lots of value for biodiversity because we are getting direct and indirect benefits from it. So we will study under two headings, that is first one being the direct utility value. So first one being the food products. So more than 200 species of angiosperms have been domesticated for the needs of food production, to meet the demand of food production. And 95% of food what we are consuming is actually produced by only 10 species of the plants. So still there are vast varieties which have to be identified and assessed for the food values. And coming to the timber. So timber trade and timber extraction, it is actually more in tropical forests. So most of the tropical forests are being degraded because of excessive harvesting of timber and also due to inadequate management strategies. Then coming to the medicinal value. Living organisms, both plants and animals, they provide us with many useful drugs and medicines. Example, if we take the Taxus species, a gymnosperm, the bark of Taxus yields a drug called Taxol, which is used for cancer treatment. So biodiversity, which has indirect utility. So how many indirect benefits we have? So first one being the genetic value. Biodiversity has valuable genetic resources because we can develop hybrid crop varieties by incorporating some useful genes from different organisms. Example, we have Bt cotton, which is a pest resistant crop. The gene which is identified from Bacillus thuringiensis bacteria is actually introduced into cotton plants. So which gives you a Bt cotton crop. And so such like this, we can develop more pest control crops, insect resistant crops. Building a gene pool to develop a biologically diverse forms is essential. And coming to the other indirect utility value is ecotourism, which is very famous. Then you know all about different places in India where we see ecotourism. Example, if we see Gnana forest in Madhya Pradesh, which is protecting the lions, river rafting and adventurous trips in Himalayan rivers, and wildlife trips in Kerala. This is actually for recreational purpose. We have peace of mind when we visit such type of places, and we'll get to know about the knowledge of rich biodiversity in India. So apart from this, the tribals and human societies attach much importance in preserving these mountains, plants, because of their religious significance, which they call as sacred groves. So sacred groves are now leading to ecotourism also. And the third one being the ecological balance. So disappearance or reduction or replacement in number of any organism brings a profound impact on a crop yield and biodiversity. Such species which brings an impact is known as keystone species. Example for keystone species is banyan tree, which is a shelter to a large number of bird species which maintains ecological balance. Decrease in the frog population is also one of the reasons in India and Pakistan for increased damage of crops and pests. And bats, birds and insects are helpful in cross-pollination. And other indirect economic value factors are we get purified air and water, mitigation of droughts and floods, generation and preservation of soil fertility, detoxification of decomposition of waste, pollination of crops and natural vegetations, seed dispersal agents, cycling of nutrients, that is which operate like nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, phosphorus cycle which operates in nature, and control of pests. Then as we have seen the threat and value of biodiversity, so there is more threat to biodiversity. There is an organization called as IUCN, it's called as International Union for Conservation of Nature, also called as World Conservation Union, which publishes a book called as Red Data Book, in which it clearly defines categories of every animal falling into particular category. And those 9 categories are data deficient, vulnerable, endangered, rare and endangered, critically endangered, etc. Then coming to the principles of conservation. Now, as we have seen, there is serious threat to biodiversity. There are certain principles which will conserve this biodiversity. So, the main objective of conservation, that is protection. Why is it important? It is important to preserve the diversity of the species, to maintain a balance of all the ecological processes, and it ensures sustainable utilization of the species and ecosystems. So, coming to the 2 categories of conservation, that is in situ method of conservation and the ex situ conservation method. In situ conservation method includes natural parks, wildlife sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, protected areas and lakes, and ex situ conservation includes zoo parks, botanical gardens, seed banks, germplasm banks. Coming to in situ method, it's actually called as on-site conservation, which means large areas of wildlife conservation are taken into consideration for protection of different species. It involves setting aside a larger areas of wildlife conservation and to protection of different species, a few species like mainly the lions, tigers or the animals whichever are falling under rare and endangered categories. It is actually studied under different headings, the first one being the national parks. In India, there are at least now 89 national parks. The famous ones are Kaziranga National Park, which is in Assam, protects the one-horned rhinoceros species and leopards, and Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand, which is famous for Royal Bengal tiger and nilgai, and Gir National Park in Madhya Pradesh, which protects the lions. Then sanctuaries, also called as wildlife sanctuaries. There are almost 492 sanctuaries around India. In Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, we have Nagarjuna Sagar and Sri Sailam, which protects cheetah and crocodiles. And we have Bharatpur Wildlife Sanctuary, which is actually a wintering area or a hibernation area for critically endangered Siberian crane, which comes all over from Siberia, and it's home for more than 230 bird species. Then we have biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves are formed under a program called Man and Biosphere Program. So the first biosphere reserve, which is in India, is actually the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve in Tamil Nadu, covering even parts of Karnataka and Kerala. There are at least 18 biosphere reserves in India. And coming to the protected areas or forests, we also call them as reserve forests. Government has identified certain forest areas as protected areas because of extensive hunting. So we have forest areas in Telangana like Nalamalla Forest, Narsapur Protected Area, Manyam and Adilabad Forest. So hunting of peacocks, deers and cutting red sandalwood trees is prohibited in these areas. Apart from the forest areas, we also have lakes identified as protected lakes like Kokolero Lake in Andhra Pradesh, Chilka Lake in Odisha, Pulikat Lake in Tamil Nadu. So these lakes are actually the places most of the migratory birds visit from far off places during the breeding season. Ex situ method means off-site conservation. It is the process of protecting an endangered species of plant or animal outside its natural habitat. Now ex situ method is something like you take away the organisms, living organisms like animals from its own habitat, from a natural habitat, and bring it to a captive breeding. Example, captive breeding is nothing but like a zoo. So captive breeding aims at maintenance of healthy genetic stocks, which helps in situ initiatives. We are protecting those organisms because they are threatened and endangered, and we are protecting them against their predators and conserving them in isolation. So conserving species in isolation is very, very important here. So zoological parks, example is Nehru Zoological Park in Hyderabad, and there are many deer parks now coming up. Then we also have botanical gardens which conserve many plant species, medicinally important species, and seed banks. In India, we can store seeds in a place called, or organization called, what we call it as Gene Bank or Germplasm Bank, which is at New Delhi, called as NBPGR, National Bureau for Plant Genetic Resources for plants. And we can also store germplasm of animals at NBAGR, that is National Bureau for Animal Genetic Resources at Karnal, Haryana. So there are now, apart from all these, so as we are seeing so many threat to biodiversity, many species of in the nature, now there are some rules and regulations or some of the conventions which took place to safeguard the biodiversity. So the first one being the CBD, we will call it as Convention on Biological Diversity, which took place, the first conference of parties was held in 1992 and 93 at Rio, Brazil. We will also call it as Earth Summit. And since 22nd May 2000, we are celebrating every year the International Day for Biodiversity. And in the year 2002, there was an act passed called as Biological Diversity Act to safeguard the rich flora and fauna. And the year 2010 is regarded as International Year of Biodiversity. And the most important one was in 2012, the Convention on Biodiversity, the 11th Conference of Party meeting was held in Hyderabad, India, on having world views on global warming. And 2018, we have 14th Conference of Parties meeting, which was held at Egypt. They discussed about Cartagena Biosafety Protocol, which safeguards or the safe handling of the live modified organisms. And this recent, India held two conventions, one in September 2019, which was held by UNCCD, that is United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification of Land, held its 14th Conference of Parties meeting at New Delhi, and its main theme was to restore the land and sustain it for future, mainly taking into consideration the degradable lands, restoring them into fertile land. And coming to the recent one in Feb 2020, the Convention on Migratory Species held its 13th Conference of Parties meeting at Gujarat, and the main theme of that is migratory species connect the planet and we all welcome them home. So biodiversity is definitely a very important aspect in our life. So therefore, in order to survive and to have a better living, biodiversity is very important. So there is an urgent need for the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable use of biodiversity, because it will benefit even our future generations. The more you will have variety, the better you will have society. So today we have learnt about biodiversity and principles of conservation, covering what is biodiversity, the definition for biodiversity, the types of biodiversity at community level being the alpha biodiversity. So far we have learned today about the definition for biodiversity, what are the levels of biodiversity. So far we have learned exactly what is biodiversity. So biodiversity is defined as variety of organisms, number of organisms and variability among the organisms in a given unit area. And the next one is levels of biodiversity, where we have covered three different levels, that is genetic diversity, species diversity and ecosystem diversity. So genetic diversity is based upon the mutations what we see in the DNA, and species diversity is the number of different species present in a unit area, and ecosystem diversity, it is between the variety of ecosystems which are occurring in a bigger geographical area. And biodiversity at community level can be studied under three types, that is alpha diversity, also called as local diversity, beta diversity in between the populations, and the third one being the gamma diversity. And next, we have studied about threat to biodiversity. We have two categories when we are studying about the threat to biodiversity. It is either caused by natural factors like climate change, where we have discussed about the recent locust swarm attacks, and global warming, change in temperatures taking place, and we also have volcanic eruptions, we have floods and etc., and forest fires. And coming to the human interference factors which are causing threat to biodiversity are habitat loss or destruction, habitat fragmentation, then we also have introduction of exotic or invasive species, hunting and poaching, and pollution, zoom cultivation, etc. Apart from this, we have also learned today about the value of biodiversity, what benefits we gain from biodiversity, mostly in two categories. The first one being the food utility, that is the direct utility value, including food products, timber extraction, etc. And indirect utility value, we have n number of factors like the keystone species, ecological balance. Human interference factors includes habitat destruction or habitat loss, where the clearance of forest is taking place, that is deforestation due to rapid industrialization and urbanization. Then habitat fragmentation, where we are breaking the forest area into smaller patches and not giving complete access for animals its complete home range. Then third one being the introduction of exotic or invasive species, whether by accidentally or purposefully, which is giving a greater impact on economic and environmental factors. And apart from this, we also have podu cultivation or zoom cultivations, or we also call it as slash and burn agriculture, practiced by northeastern states of India by tribal communities, where they completely clear off the forest area for cultivation of crops, and then they, after harvesting, they burn the crops, and in this way they create a mosaic pattern in the forest areas, leading to the extinction of species. Then apart from this, we also have the value of biodiversity being the direct utility value and indirect utility value. Direct utility value, we have food products, we have more than 95% of food is coming from only 10% species, so there is lots and lots of species have to be assessed for the greater food value. Then coming to the timber extraction, we have extensive timber extraction taking place, which is leading to the decrease in the reduction of the rain cover forest. And third one being the ecological balance. Keystone species have to be maintained in order to maintain biodiversity, because loss of one species will have a negative impact on the entire ecosystem. Then coming to the other values, indirect utility values, we have high genetic value, that is we can create n number of hybrid high yielding varieties or hybrid crop varieties which are pest resistant, insect resistant, etc. Apart from that, we also have ecotourism leading to for recreational purposes, like we have peace of mind when we visit some places like wildlife trips or Himalayan river rafting, etc. Then apart from that, we also have seed dispersal agents like birds, insects and pollinating agents, etc. Mitigation of floods, purified air and water, what we are getting directly from the biodiversity. Then apart from that, we have studied about IUCN classification, where each organism is classified into one particular category, either as rare and endangered, critically endangered, threatened organism, extinct or extinct in wild, or globally endangered animals. Then coming to the principles of conservation, we have studied about two different categories, where in situ conservation, which is called as on-site conservation, we are protecting the animals and plant species within its natural habitat. We are not disturbing them. So that's called as in situ method of conservation, where the bigger, larger wild areas are taken into consideration and conserved there intact. So example, in situ method, we have many national parks in India. Then we have wildlife sanctuaries and bird sanctuaries in India. Apart from that, we also have protected areas or protected lakes like Pulicat Lake, Koleru Lake, Chilka Lake, which is a home for migratory species. Apart from that, we also have protected forest or reserve forest, what we call as Adilabad Reserve Forest or Manyam Reserve Forest, etc., which is home for many important endangered or threatened species. And coming to the ex situ conservation covers the part where the animals which are threatened, we try to remove them from that particular threatened habitat and try to protect them under captivity. So with utmost human care. So we are trying to eradicate the danger from predators to that particular threatened animal. So captivity will give you the healthy genetic stocks, because most of the food what we provide, or the habitat what we provide, it is actually the most purified one to that particular animal, and there is less chances of diseases in the animal getting infected in captivity. So biodiversity is definitely important. When we see we have rich economic value, apart from the aesthetic value, we also have rich economic value. So these are I hope you all like the lecture on biodiversity. Thank you.